easier to produce. It has all of the not each of them will mark an epoch in human progress. Hydron, 400 happy smiley. The master tone of its octave is a non-inflammable inert gas which is in every way superior for transportation to hydrogen because it is much lighter, absolutely non-injurious and easier to produce. It has all of the safety qualities of helium and its carrying capacity exceeds that of helium by 8 times and is double that of hydrogen. Both hydrogen and helium can be produced by transmutation in unlimited quantities at an expense which is negligible, while helium, of a sufficient quantity to fill a dirigible, produced by the present methods, now costs $750,000. The control of the production of this gas by any nation would ensure the peace of the world. Luminon, 403, is the basis of the cold light of the future. Luminosity of better color can be produced by regenerative excitation of this radiative gas at about 1/40,000th of the expenditure of energy necessary to produce the same degree of luminosity by the use of a tungsten filament. Luminon can also be produced by transmutation at a negligible expenditure. Luminon is plentiful in many substances, but its separation would involve more labor and expense than would its production by transmutation, which means simply the changing of dimension of a basic supply which is plentiful in those high octaves familiarly termed the air. Chapter 7. Instability and the illusion of stability in motion. The chemist can solve his problems only through knowledge of the various dimensions of the elements with which he has to deal, their relative instability, and their relative illusion of stability. To write in sufficient detail the various relations of motion, and to organize them as a higher electrochemistry, will require a volume in itself which will follow this one at a later date. Suffice it for this volume that the accompanying working chart of the chemist's 6 octaves be herein given, together with 4 charts demonstrating the orderliness of stability and instability in motion. The universe of motion is a swinging of the cosmic pendulum from the stability of concept in inertia to the instability of the image of concept in motion, and back again to the stability of memory of concept in inertia. Concept precedes motion. Motion begins in concept. Concept takes place in inertial equilibrium. Motion is born of opposition to equilibrium. The universal balance cannot be upset. No state other than an equilibrium is possible. The concept of an action designed to upset the universal balance by overcoming inertia is, when executed as an action, simultaneously opposed by a reaction designed to restore that balance. The result of action and reaction is to create the illusion of stability through a division of the force of action and reaction into apparent opposites. An opposed state is an unstable state which simulates stability through motion in equal and opposite actions and reactions. Therefore, stability cannot lie in motion. For all motion is opposed and divided in its opposition. Stability is the inactivity of the state of equilibrium. The dimensionless universe of concept is the universe of stability. The universe of expression of concept, through motion, is the universe of dimension. The universe of dimension is the universe of the illusion of stability. The elements of matter with which the chemist has to deal are opposed states of motion which become increasingly unstable as they depart from the inert gases, reaching maximum instability at the carbon line. The illusion of stability is least in the lower tones and reaches its maximum at the carbon line. The lower the potential, electric pressure, valency, temperature, and density, the greater the stability of the elements, and the less the illusion of stability. Conversely, the higher the potential, magnetic pressure, valency, temperature, and density, the less the stability and the greater the illusion of stability. Every chemical effect is an electromagnetic effect. Every electromagnetic effect is a mechanical effect. This universe of motion is a machine in which every mass in motion is a wheel geared into another wheel. Celestial mechanics vary not one bit from the mechanics of man. If one wheel changes its dimensions, all wheels change to conform to that change. The precessional movements of planets and solar systems are made with wheels of bevel gears with cones rolling upon cones and shafts eccentrically placed. The great wheels of solar systems change their bevels and their eccentricities to conform to their positions in the machine of which they are a part. There is but one position in the universal machine in which the wheels run parallel in plane without intersection, without precession, and without eccentricity. In this position in the atom, or its repetition in larger masses, there are no equinoxes, no ascending or descending nodes, and no aphelions or perihelions. This is in the element carbon, where inhalation ends and exhalation begins, where instability and the illusion of stability are at their maximum. There are cone and disc clutches in the universal machine which grasp and slip with the same relative persistence and looseness with which man is perfectly familiar in his mechanics. These qualities give us relatively rigid bodies, such as this dense planet, the more dense Sun, pithy Saturn, and vaporous Neptune. These qualities give us the same relative rigidities in the elements, such as carbon in the diamond, and less dense substances down through the solid metals and metalloids to their gaseous expansions in such elements as hydrogen and its mate alionon. The contours of the cone clutches which give great surface tension pressure contract toward the poles, disappearing in the axes and gravitative centers of all masses. The disc clutches which slip are the contours of expanding cones. These lose their ability to hold as the cones expand into disappearance at the equatorial planes of all masses. Stability in motion is, therefore, greatest at the centers of all masses and, superficially, at their poles. On the contrary, instability in motion is greatest at the equators of all masses. As a consequence, rigidity in all mass is greatest at its poles where the cone clutches hold. And flexibility is greatest at its equators where the disc clutches slip. The cone clutches at the poles of the sun of our solar system, for example, hold fast. That is why the expanded magnetic basis of the equatorial belt of the sun moves faster than the contracted polar magnetic bases. That is also why the equatorial belt of the sun is hotter than the polar zones. The slipping of the oppositely moving disks generates much heat. That explains the boiling bubbles which we call sunspots, which move nearer to the equator of the sun and farther away again in oppositely whirling spiral pools during each 11-year breathing period of the sun. That is why the corona of the sun extends so far into interstellar space at its equator and so much less so at its poles. That is how, and one reason why, another planet will soon be born to the already pregnant sun. That is why Jupiter has its belts and Saturn the rings which Jupiter will also have when his axis tilts a little farther to change the bevel gearing of his wheels. That is why Uranus and Neptune are reversing their poles. That is why nature added the gyroscopic principle to her mechanics of motion in order to create the illusion of stability in her corpuscular solids of motion. That explains the isoclinal lines which run around this planet, forming new bases for the expanding cones of radiation. Like the rim of an umbrella which gradually opens until it is in one plane. That is why all masses emanate magnetic lines of force at isoclinal lines and regenerate them by absorption at the poles. That is why the compass needle loses its dip on the zero isoclinal line, which roughly follows the geographic equator, and swings its north pole to the south magnetic pole south of that line and to the north magnetic pole when proceeding north from it. Motion is an appearance born of the axis of a conceptive cone in inertia. It assumes the appearance of an expanding cone and disappears through radiation in equatorial opposition. The universal machine is a gyroscopic top. When it is in little motion, its form is a cone, like a top gyrating unsteadily on an eccentric axis. When it is in great motion, it loses the altitude and eccentricity of its axis and becomes a gyroscope revolving steadily in one plane. The generative attractive principle is the principle of contracting cones. All mass is generated and regenerated by a contractive pressure exerted in the direction of its gravitative center. Its minimum of generative pressure is exerted from its equatorial plane and its maximum pressure from its pole. The radiative repellent principle is the principle of expanding cones. All mass is radiated and diffused by an expansive pressure exerted in the direction of its surface. Its minimum of radiative pressure is exerted from its pole and its maximum from its equatorial plane. By arranging the elements in the orderly positions of their relative stability and instability, as in the accompanying chart, the chemist can work out his problems much more simply upon paper.